Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fraud Panel, where we will be answering many questions for you today. My name is Elissa Parker. I am an internal fraud investigator here at BECU. In a couple minutes, I will be joined by Robert and Robin and Debbie. But first, I am going to talk to you a little bit about this slide here. So this is a fraud report, as you can see, and it goes over the top three categories, which are identity theft, imposter scams, credit bureau info reports. So as you can see here, 2.8 million fraud reports were made in 2021. That is so many. That's absolutely crazy. But fraud is happening everywhere, and it happens in many forms and many ways, unfortunately. Just below here, you can see that younger people reported losing money to fraud more often than older people. So if you weren't able to join us for the previous member summit, Spot the Scams report that we just did, we went over a quiz topic that asked who were the most popular victims for romance scams in 2021. And there were several options there ranging from, the 19 to 29 age, the 30s and 40s, 50s to 60s, and then 70 plus. And a lot of people thought that it would normally be between the 45 to 60 range, but it's actually become extremely popular within the 19 to 29 range, the younger crowd. And the main reason for that is dating apps. Unfortunately, social media has taken over our lives. We all have it in some way, shape, or form, whether that's Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, but then you throw dating apps in the mix, and now you've got more access to people than ever before. So unfortunately, younger people are becoming victims of romance scams, and that's why you're seeing the increase listed below. Imposter scams, 1 in 5 people lost money. So imposter scams are a form of people pretending to be someone else that they are not and recruiting people to deposit funds on their behalf and then leaving you with a negative balance once they get the money that they request. And then identity theft reports, 64% up for checking and savings accounts. That's crazy. It's definitely important to protect your information. Never provide your social security number. Never provide information over the phone or to someone you've never met. Make sure that you're verifying who you're providing information to, such as your social security number, date of birth, your address, things of that nature that can identify you. All right, so now we will be joined by Robert, Robin, and Debbie, and we will be answering all of your questions that you have. So please feel free to drop your questions below. Debbie will be watching for those questions so that she can give them to us to answer for you today. Hello.
Whoa.
Hi.
All right. Perfect. Hello, there's Debbie. I thought we lost
Hello.
you for a second.
Oh.
All
Well,
right.
I'm not seeing a whole lot of questions yet.
Yeah, no worries. Give them some time.
Yeah.
Drop your questions down there.
I know that I did have a question that I saw pop up earlier, Robin, that hopefully you can help us answer.
Sure.
And that question had to do with utilizing public Wi-Fi. What are your thoughts and suggestions on utilizing public Wi-Fi, especially for like logging into your online banking account and things of that nature?
So let me just say this: just don't. You never want to use public Wi-Fi to log into any banking account ever. And the reason for that, honestly, there could be a man in the middle who is basically siphoning any information that you're putting in your account, so they get your password and your actually your credentials. So you never want to use public Wi-Fi for that. Public Wi-Fi is great for if you're watching movies, right? But never for banking, ever. Just say no.
Absolutely. I second that. You never know who could be looking over your shoulder. You never know who could be an amazing hacker sitting right next to you. I mean, I don't know. Everyone
Very
has
true.
a job nowadays. Their job might be hacking and scamming, fortunately.
Exactly.
So somebody is asking, is it a myth that Macs are safer than PCs?
Let me take that to start with. It is definitely a myth. In the beginning, honestly, people thought that Macs were safer because there wasn't very many people using Macs, right? So hackers would think, well, why should we write code to hack Macs because not very many people own it? Well, nowadays, pretty much everybody owns a Mac. If they don't, they have a PC. But Macs are definitely more prone now than I would say PCs for attacks. Now, that's not to say that they're just as safe as PCs or PCs are safer than Macs. They're all open. It's all open game. That's my opinion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we could all raise our hands right now who's Mac versus Samsung, and I've got the Apple Watch, the laptop, the iPhone, and I
Exactly.
trust it, but I think it's all about how you utilize, your information online and
Mhm.
like we just discussed, not utilizing public Wi-Fi for things that are important like your online banking and that
Mm-hmm.
nature. So definitely how you go about utilizing the tools that you have.
And I think
Exactly.
one distinction I would add to that question as well is these days with how much more popular cell phones are. I think I use my cell phone a lot more than I use my computer if you exclude,
Mm-hmm.
working on a computer. And it used to be that people thought cell phones were much safer, but your cell phone's just a small computer now. Your
Oh
your
yeah.
your cell phone has files, it has a browser, it has a command prompt, it has all the same things your computer does. So,
Exactly.
Absolutely.
same risks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To include tracking software on it, right? Because you
Oh
don't
Right.
yeah.
have to use your
Yeah.
phone. So
Find
yeah.
my iPhone app.
Yep. Right.
Yep.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes.
So another question that's come through is, what should I do if I receive a call or a text from BECU or another company requesting personal information or account information?
Take it
I
away,
can go ahead
Robert.
and start.
Oh, go
Oh,
ahead. Yeah.
go ahead, Robert. Go
No,
ahead. Go
you're
ahead.
good.
I'm
Go ahead.
sorry. I'm sorry. The first thing you really should do is call the bank. Call BECU. Verify that they're contact you, and then find out what information they need over the phone. Don't just click on a text or think that it's safe because 9 times out of 10 it is not. In fact, 10 times out of 10 it's not. Just don't. Call BECU.
I even work at BECU, and I have to admit, I got a thing saying we need to call us and make sure this transaction on your credit card is really valid. And I actually called the main number of our own credit union and said, "Is this for real?" And they went, "Yes, you need to talk to somebody." So it was like, "Oh, thank God."
We
Yeah.
highly suggest that. We absolutely encourage that. I mean, I remember I had called someone who I had suspected had fraud on his account that he wasn't participating in, and when I called him, he was like, it sounds great, but let me go ahead and call you back through a number that
Yeah.
I know. And I was like, please do that. I appreciate that. I would rather you feel comfortable talking to me so that I can help you rather than you kind of feeling weary about this entire conversation. So always a good idea.
Absolutely.
Speaking of that, I knew our main number, but somebody is saying on here that they had an issue with a company and called them straight from the number that they actually found on Google, and it wasn't them. Is there a way they tried to get them to buy a gift card and everything? So how do you know you're calling the right company if Google is wrong?
I have a couple
Go ahead.
opinions and tips on this. First of all, never take the very first number that you see on Google. Go to the main legitimate website. The problem is that when you type in, Comcast into Google, Comcast customer service phone number, you don't know what number could pop up. You need to go to the actual website. The other option is looking for maybe a piece of mail or a card that's been provided to you from that specific company.
Mhm.
I get my power bill in the mail every single month. I would call the number on there before the one on Google. So it's always super important to do your due diligence and be looking into the phone numbers and not just taking what Google says. Go to the legitimate website.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. When I recommend people to call the 1-800 number at BECU, I actually always say get it off the back of your debit card because unless you're
Mhm.
David Blaine, you can't really
Mhm.
change, the number on a physical card. So I think that's really good advice. Actually, I never thought to verbalize that. But the other recommendation for this is when you have a company that is able, that is a pretty complicated thing for a company to fake like have their first Google result be their spam number, that is complicated enough that they're not just targeting you. That's a rather wide net that they're casting. So you can always do a little bit of extra research. You actually shockingly will get a lot of nice information on Google if you add keywords like scam or fraud. So if you're trying to verify a number, if you put that number in quotations and then other quotations, fraud or scam, you will get all sorts of websites where people are discussing it. So if you can't get, a verifiable piece of contact information from something you've received from the business, it's okay to do a little bit of poking around and research. You never get in trouble for being too careful.
The other thing I like to add to that is there's more browsers out there. There's also more search engines. So if you're not sure about Google, there are other search engines that you could use to verify. Don't just go with the first thing, because Google's popular and hackers know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you as a consumer have to do your due diligence, I'm afraid, and check other sources.
That makes sense. So somebody wants to know, how do they stay safe from card skimmers that are often at ATMs or gas stations? And I don't know what this actually stands for. The RFID skimmers?
Tap scanners, I believe.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Robert,
how do
you want to answer that one?
those?
Yeah, I can start on this one. So realistically, skimming is it's one of those things that you're not afraid of until you hear about it happening. In other words, it's not that common, but it does happen. Skimming does occur. So one of the things you can do to keep yourself safest, this will sound very familiar from my colleague on our earlier presentation, but if you are using a point of sale terminal or somewhere where you're inserting your card in a public place, or I guess a private place, like a gas station pump, maybe on the seedier side of town, or one of those ATMs that's just standing there in the middle of Dallas for some reason, if you use one of these locations, if you have to use them, give the card reader a bit of a jiggle, see if it comes off, or better yet, use your card as a credit card, and input your zip code and then charge it as a credit transaction rather than as a debit. However, that's a best of. That's a what's the phrase? Do that if you have to use it. Otherwise, always look for safe alternatives. I always pay for my gas at the cash register. I know it seems heavy-handed and you have to interact with another person, which can be really tiring after a long work day, but social interaction is good for you. And also it's good for your debit card safety, where that information is a lot less likely to get stolen inside. I tend to be pretty sketched out about RFID scanners, unreasonably so. Digital cards are very safe. They are a safe system. That's why they're in circulation. But you do hear people talking about those bump scanners, like people bumping into you and scanning your card through your bag. If you are prone to being anxious about that, there are wallets or sliders that you can put your card into. I see no problem with that. Like I said, you never get in trouble for being too careful.
Yeah.
If you do utilize the gas pump too, this is my number one suggestion, is don't enter in your PIN at the gas pump, enter in the zip code. So the gas pump will always give you an option to hit credit instead of debit. And if you do that, you can enter in your zip code, and that's a way to prevent your PIN number from being entered in and taken with that information. So that's another way to protect yourself. And then, like you mentioned, really staying away from standalone ATMs. Sometimes you have to use them. I've done it. You have to stop at a gas station to get some money. Like, it is what it is. But the standalone ATMs are more prone just because they still utilize the mag strip as opposed to the chip on your card. So that's another way to protect yourself.
So that's great information. Somebody is asking, should they use an antivirus on your phone?
Absolutely, you should. Absolutely. Remember, your phone is just like a miniature computer. So if you have antivirus on there, you can scan it and make sure there's not any malware or viruses on your phone. Absolutely.
Yeah. We're all holding iPads basically, or Microsoft tablets. Like, that's how we need to think about it, right? It's a
Absolutely.
computer. It's just as important as your desktop that you use at home or your iPad that you use on the couch, or it's all the same. So absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, sorry.
Ahead.
I'll just add one more bit. If you just stop and like a little brain exercise for a few seconds, if you just think about all the things that you do on your phone. And I'll give you an example. I pay all my credit cards on my phone. I text my family on my phone. I don't say my passwords on there, but I'm sure some people do have passwords saved on their phones as well. Every thought I've ever had in my brain, which are not many, but every thought that I do have in there, I write in a notepad in there because I like to read them back. Your phone is covered in personal information. It is saturated with personal information. The iPhone and Android systems, they do their best to monitor app usage. They do their best to monitor how apps interact with each other, but nothing will beat just a few seconds or a few minutes of some due diligence and just download a good program. Find a good antivirus program and
use it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of having all of your passwords and stuff, is it safe to have my PIN written down anywhere?
No,
No.
never. Please don't ever do it. Never, ever write down your PIN number. If you were with us for the previous panel, we discussed protecting your PIN or protecting your online banking username like it was your license. You can't just hand over your license for someone else to use. Same thing with the PIN number. It's called a personal identification number for a reason. You get to pick it when you have an account with BECU, so it should always be a number that you know, and it is never something that you should provide to anyone. If you willingly give out your PIN number, you are willingly giving out access to utilize your account, the funds in your account, and you don't want to do that because what if they steal your money one day? That's not cool,
So actually, along those lines, somebody's asking, is it okay to let my family, who I, know well, use my debit or credit card ever?
No, I mean, my mom's let me use hers, right? Like everyone does it. I get it, especially moms and daughters, sons and fathers.
Yeah.
I get it. It happens. But realistically, you should not allow that to happen because let's throw out this theory. I'm a mom. I give my daughter my debit card and PIN number. She goes out with her friends to the mall. She drops my card while she is shopping her little heart away, and then someone picks it up. Someone could now take and attempt to use my card at several different locations. Now, they don't have the PIN number if it's my debit card, but if it's my credit card, they could go real crazy anywhere they want to go, right? So it's super important that you never do that, because if you were to provide your card, and we know that, unfortunately, you have willingly allowed your card to be in someone else's hands, and you could be responsible for all the fraudulent activity that takes place.
Yeah.
I would add as well, in that example, there's another situation that could happen, which is a really good thought exercise for liability and the question of who's responsible for paying for what. Let's say that you gave your daughter your debit card and she goes to the mall with her friends, and let's say one of her friends takes the card and decides to buy himself a PlayStation 5 with it, and suddenly $600 down the drain, but you know who took the money. It was that kid. That kid now has a PlayStation. And so the question is then who pays for that? It's probably going to be you, because you gave the card to someone who then gave it to someone else. And so it's not like some criminal somewhere is running around with $600. That kid has the $600 worth of product. So that's kind of another way to orient that story to really show you how the conversation around liability for scams and fraud is really ultimately just a question of, well, where did that money go? So.
I just have one thing to add to that. Those guys work in the fraud department, so please listen to what they are saying. They are dropping some great nuggets that can help you.
Thank you for that. We appreciate that because we have these conversations daily, and I get it. You don't know unless somebody tells you, but by the time someone tells you, it could be too late. And we are trying to spread the knowledge.
Right. And somebody's asking, that they lost their Social Security card, and should they be worried, and what could happen, and what should they do?
You
want to take it away?
Sure. Yeah. Well, one of the big questions is, where'd you lose it? Because I actually don't think I know where I think it's in there. I think it's
Robert.
I'm pretty sure it's in my file of important documents. I just, like, off the top of my head, don't remember where I put it. But I'm sort of kidding to make a point. generally speaking, if you don't know where your social security card is, that's one thing. But if you're afraid you've lost it, like if you actually haven't seen it in a few years, that doesn't necessarily mean it's somewhere dangerous, but that is something worth acting on. It is, at the very least, start checking your credit report. But if you want to be more heavy-handed about it, contact the Social Security office. Arrange to have it changed. That Social Security number is a very important piece of data. These days, and I'm sure the other two can give me any wisdom on how exactly far we take this, but these days, a Social Security number alone is probably not going to get you a loan. Like most most programs, we'll catch it. But that's still a lot of information. A Social Security number should be private, always and always, just like your PIN.
Does that mean you should also not carry it with you?
No, never. Oh my gosh, never.
Yeah.
You should never have a copy of your Social Security card on your person ever.
Right.
And I'm going to take it one step further to what Robert said about checking out your credit report. Put a freeze on your credit report.
Yes.
That way, any time that your Social Security is ran, you have to approve if that is actually you or not. So, if you were to drop your Social Security card, we're going to use the mall again because it's popular. Let's say you have your Social Security card on your person, which you never should. Please don't ever do it. But you have it and you drop it at the mall, and then you call and you put a freeze on your credit report, and then someone attempts to go to another financial institution about a week later and apply for an auto loan using your Social Security card, your Social Security number, I apologize. You will be able to get the alert that says, hey, we show that, Mountain Financial Credit Union is trying to run your Social Security number for an auto loan. That's a made-up credit union, by the way. I don't know if that's real. But they're trying to run your Social Security number for an auto loan. Is this you? Are you really trying to do that? And you could be like, no, it's not me. That way you are not getting a loss on something that you did not even apply for. So super important, definitely take a look at your credit report, freeze your credit report, notify your financial institution if you ever do lose your Social Security card. That way we can also add a code word for you that if anyone was with us in the previous slides, we mentioned BECU offers a code word, which is essentially a password for any time that you call or come into BECU. It is fully up to you to pick what your password would like it to be. We will never ask you for it unless you call or come into BECU, and it's never something that you should provide, just like your PIN number or your Social Security card for a random reason. It's something that should stay close to you. So absolutely don't keep your Social Security card with you.
And isn't it true you can get a copy of all three of your credit reports at least once a year for free? Is that true?
Actually, weekly.
Where do you do
currently.
That?
Yeah.
Weekly. Okay.
Yeah, annualcreditreport.com, right? That's Robert, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, annualcreditreport.com currently, because of COVID, is offering weekly reports. It's normally annually, like it says, but currently it is weekly because of COVID. So. And
is there a reason to be nervous about any other provider than annualcreditreport.com?
I want to say that annualcreditreport.com is the most vetted website. It's the only one that we would suggest. So I haven't utilized or referenced any others personally, and I don't know that I would. I don't know how to necessarily answer if you should be worried about them. I'm sure that there might be a couple more out there that are comparable, but Annual Credit Report is really the only one that is like referenced and known and credible that I am aware of personally.
I do have a strong opinion on this that I'll share briefly, that your credit information is valuable information. Your credit information is also of interest to companies that want to sell you credit cards, to be simple. So remember that, I know we keep referencing our last presentations because it was an excellent presentation. One of the things is that if it's too good to be true, it probably is. So be mindful that when you sign up for any service, even perfectly legitimate services, be thoughtful about what you are trading. If you have a company which is giving you information about your credit score, and if it's free, if you're not paying for it, then it's not free. you're paying with something. Is it fraud? Not necessarily, no. But the thing about annualcreditreport.com is that this is authorized by federal law. This is a very specific website that is designed to offer you this service because of our country's, in my opinion, pretty awful reliance on the credit system. But it is what it is. It exists, therefore federal law requires that this website be made available. So that's the one we recommend. Just be thoughtful about other credit monitoring services that you may use.
That makes sense.
Debbie,
So
do you
somebody-
mind if I step in and ask a question? Because I have a question for Robin.
Sure.
Robin, what are the top 3 things that you would suggest for preventing cybersecurity crimes?
First thing would be pay attention. Pay attention to surroundings, pay attention to what emails, be very detail oriented. That would be the first thing. The second thing would be make sure that if you are at home or somewhere safe on being online, that somebody's not behind you watching what you're typing in, especially if you're trying to get to your banking app, right?
Yeah.
And the third thing is never, ever, ever share your information with anyone. Never.
Say it louder.
Yes. Never share your information with anyone. I can't emphasize that enough, because once they have that information, and believe me, it's easy to get if you aren't safe, you're just setting yourself up for problems.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So somebody is asking if funds are, why are funds available if the check is actually a bad check?
It's a great question. I could take it. I'll start.
Yeah,
Robert,
go
you
ahead.
might have
Yeah.
things to add, but essentially a check has to be verified with the financial institution that it's coming from, right? So when you deposit a check, there is a certain amount that is provided immediately, but does have the ability to return for up to a year. Normally, it will happen within 7 to 10 days, but it can take up to a year to return. Now, as a financial institution, we can't necessarily leave you without that money that entire year just to make sure it's good, right? It's your money. We understand why you want it. So it is important to stay, cautious when you do accept checks from people and allow the 7 to 10 day time frame before the check has the possibility to return, because there will be a portion that is provided immediately. That information then gets sent to the financial institution, who will, either allow the deposit to go through or will show that funds aren't actually available on that account, and then send that information back to BECU. So we are essentially at the mercy of the other financial institution being able to verify that funds are available. So super important with any checks that are written off of deposit accounts that you are remaining cautious when you accept them, deposit them, allow for at least, I would suggest, the 10 business day time frame before utilizing the funds, and then you're probably safe. It will normally return within 7 to 10 days. And another thing, cashier checks are a really great way to accept checks or accept forms of payment if you are looking for the funds right away. Cashier checks, we are able to verify with other financial institutions that the funds are legitimate and available. They are guaranteed funds checks, right? So cashier's checks are always a good way to go about it if you have someone that needs to give you a check, but you want to avoid the possible return for whatever reason that it could return.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
a
funny.
related question is there harm in depositing a check to see if it's valid?
There can be. I think it's all about how and if you utilize it, right?
Yep.
If you deposit a check, but you allow the time frame for the check to, possibly return, and it doesn't, and then you start utilizing the funds, let's say it does return a year down the road, we're probably going to call you and be like, hey, do you have any idea why this returned? Or maybe have a discussion with you about the activity on the account. But if you allow that time frame, no, it's not a harm necessarily. Where it becomes harmful is if you deposit a check, utilize the funds immediately, and then leave your account in a negative standing balance. You definitely don't want to do that. Again, it's really about allowing the time for the check to verify and go through. Give it the 10 business days, always.
Got it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Oh, sorry.
Oh, and
Robert.
I'll add really quickly. By the way, it's funny because Alyssa is the one who taught me how check deposits and check holds work 6 years ago when I first joined BECU. So it's a funny memory. But one thing that I would add as well is another way to understand the whole process of depositing a check is this exchange of temporary credit while we as your institution are getting those funds for you. This is not actually a free out of the blue service. This whole interaction is based on your existing relationship with BECU. We're able to do this. You're able to do this because you have an account with us. So when you deposit checks, when you ask for these kind of funds to be processed on your behalf, this is on the basis of you being a BECU member. This is why fraudsters want to recruit you. This is why fraudsters will tell you to open a BECU account, because that relationship is in and of itself valuable. And so I will say that while there isn't necessarily harm in depositing a check to see if it's valid, I wouldn't necessarily do that because you are putting that strain on your relationship with BECU. And whether it's cybersecurity or whether it's investigations, each of our departments, each of our teams will see these things and will inform our decisions on risk. If you are constantly depositing every piece of paper that has writing on it, we do see that, and that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to, call you mad, but it does inform us on how much of a risk your account can be. So
No,
I just want to
absolutely.
add that.
Thank you for saying that,
Absolutely.
because it's definitely not recommended that you go around depositing every check you get, of course, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is definitely within reason, and knowing that you should be providing the time for the check to possibly return and understanding the risk of depositing the check. So absolutely. Thank you.
I just have one thing I'd like to say before we
Yeah.
end. It's really important. BECU cares about you, and I can't emphasize this enough. We have free classes, free educational cybersecurity classes to help you learn about what the topics they're talking about now, opening up an account and passwords, what is malware. I just want to let you know BECU offers that free training to you, and I hope that you take advantage of it because it'll just benefit you and your whole family. And it is a win-win for us, and it's a win-win for you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, it looks like we have about 4 minutes left, so I think we have time for a couple more questions. And so there's one that's asking the difference between a freeze and a fraud alert. Apparently, they put a fraud alert on their credit report, but the lender didn't pull. They went ahead with the transaction, and then it wasn't until the very end that they were pulling the information forward. And so, should they have done a freeze instead of a fraud alert to protect themselves? Do you have any idea about that?
Yeah, so I would personally say a freeze is always better, because then you have the ability to call and unlock the freeze prior to applying for a loan. That way it doesn't cause you any random scares while you're trying to get a brand new car or something. So a freeze is always better, in my personal opinion. It's what I would suggest. The fraud alert on the on your credit report, essentially, like, what they would have to do is what they should have done, and I know that BECU does for fraud alerts on credit reports, is they'll contact you and attempt to verify you with additional information to verify if you are legitimately the one that is applying for the loan. Right. And so that's very unfortunate. I am not sure what happened in your situation, but I know that what likely should have happened, or what I would hope would happen in the future, is that they call and attempt to verify you with additional information rather than allowing the entire process to go through and get to the end. So I would definitely recommend a freeze over a fraud alert. That way you have the on and off switch for it. Right? You have the ability to keep it locked, keep it closed. If anyone tries to apply for anything, you're going to get a notification. They're also not going to be able to apply for it because your social security number is frozen. It's locked. And then you have the ability to go in and say, yeah, this is actually me. I do really want this, new Forerunner. I'm here. I'm getting it. Or it won't go through because it's locked to the point where they can't access it.
Great. And then someone else is asking, they pay for a lot of stuff on by phone. I know this even happens to me with pizza, and they get asked the number, the expiration date, and the code on the back. Should you give that? I mean, I know it happens to me a lot too, so I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give a bit of an answer, but I'm curious to hear what you two think. I would say that it's ultimately about as risky as giving your card to a merchant in a store. Ultimately speaking, you're doing the same thing. You're doing a card authorization. Luckily, you're not providing your PIN. You're just providing the CVV code on the back of your card. So you do have a certain level of more protection on that kind of transaction than you would an ATM withdrawal. But I do know I personally, and it's not my disdain for the phone. In this case, I do just not like giving my card number. So I do tend to try to do things with online portals as much as I can. But it is not, at least in my opinion, it's not an inherently risk-filled thing to do.
Great. Well, I think that was all the time we have for questions. I think we're at the end.
Yeah, perfect. So I do apologize if we weren't able to answer everyone's questions. You guys had a lot of great ones, and we would be more than happy to continue answering them, but we will need you to send them to communityrelations@becu.org, and they will be able to direct them to the right people to answer appropriately. We would love to keep answering your questions if you send them there. And then if you do scroll down to the bottom of the page, there is a survey that you can fill out. Please go ahead and scroll down, take it, let us know your feedback and how you feel we did on the session.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. Robert, Robin, Debbie, and I appreciate you, and have a wonderful night.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.